They don't hate you because you did something wrong. They don't hate you because you lied, cheated, or stole. No, they hate you because you're finally getting better. Some people don't dislike you because of who you are now. They dislike you because of what you're becoming. And as strange as it may sound, your healing is making them uncomfortable. Why? Because your healing is taking away the one thing they could always count on: your brokenness, your dysfunction, your pain. There are individuals who, whether consciously or unconsciously, learned how to navigate your wounds. They knew how to speak to your insecurity. They knew how to manipulate your low self-esteem. They understood your triggers, your need for validation, and they positioned themselves as saviors, friends, or supporters. But their kindness was conditional. It was built on your weakness, not your strength. The moment you started to heal, you shifted the power dynamic. Now you're not responding to their emotional manipulation. You're not running to them with every problem. You're no longer crying in their lap, begging for affirmation. And they hate that, because the healing you're experiencing is making you stronger, wiser, and more self-sufficient. And that threatens the control they had over your story. There are people who liked you better when you were needy, when you were desperate, when you couldn't think clearly. When your trauma clouded your judgment, they had room to step in and be needed. But now that you're healing, your clarity is increasing. You're seeing patterns. You're seeing red flags. You're recognizing that some of the very people who were cheering you on were secretly planting seeds of self-doubt to keep you dependent on them, and your healing exposes it all. People don't talk about this side of growth. They don't talk about how painful it can be to realize that some of the relationships in your life only existed because you were broken. They were only sustainable because you were hurting. And when you begin to rise, when you begin to get whole, those same people start acting strange. They grow distant. They start criticizing your choices. They say you've changed, and you have, because healing requires change. It demands it, and here's the difficult part. Many of these people won't say it outright. They won't come to you and say, "I'm mad that you're getting better." No, it's more subtle. They'll withdraw their support. They'll make passive-aggressive comments. They'll remind you of who you used to be. You think you're better than us now. You've forgotten where you came from. You've changed. That's how they mask their discomfort. By trying to guilt, trip you back into the version of yourself that made them feel safe and powerful. You must understand that some people are only comfortable when you are uncomfortable. They thrive when you're chaotic. They feel secure when you're insecure. They feel needed when you're falling apart. And when you stop falling apart, when you start putting the pieces back together, they no longer know their place in your life. Your healing disrupts the ecosystem of dependency they created. You stop chasing. You stop apologizing for everything. You start setting boundaries. You start saying no. You stop tolerating what you used to cry over. And that terrifies them. The truth is, your brokenness was never the real problem. It was the permission slip they used to enter and stay in your life. But healing is a locked door. Healing requires you to protect your peace. Healing doesn't allow access to everyone, especially those who abused your vulnerability. When you were broken, you let anyone in because you didn't believe you deserved better. But now you do. Now you know what peace feels like. Now you understand the value of mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And that makes you dangerous to people who are only ever committed to your pain. Some of the loudest voices you'll hear during your healing journey will be the ones trying to pull you back into familiar pain. Not because they love you, not because they care, but because they don't know how to relate to you as a healed person. They were comfortable with the version of you who accepted crumbs. They were at ease with the version of you who never said no. But healing forces change, not just in you, but in every relationship connected to you, and not everyone is willing to change with you. So don't be surprised when the congratulations don't come. Don't be surprised when they mock your growth, question your motives, or walk away altogether. It's not about you. It's about the fact that your healing took away their power. They can't guilt you anymore. They can't gaslight you anymore. They can't manipulate you with your past because you've finally realized your past is not your prison. It was your process, and your process is what's producing your power. Keep healing. Keep growing. Let them hate, because their hate isn't a reflection of your wrong. It's a confirmation of your transformation. You're not responsible for their discomfort. You're not obligated to shrink so they can feel big. You're not called to stay broken just so others can feel important. You are healing, and healing is holy even when it's hated. Your growth isn't loud, but it's shaking the room. It isn't arrogant, but it's making people uncomfortable. You're not trying to boast, but your healing is revealing something that many don't want to face. The fact that they're still stuck. And while you've been quietly climbing out of pits of pain, pushing through storms of insecurity, walking away from trauma and fighting to reclaim your joy, there are people watching you, not with support, but with resentment. Because every step you take toward wholeness becomes a mirror they never asked for, a mirror that reflects everything they've refused to address within themselves. That's what growth does. It doesn't just elevate you, it challenges others. It confronts them, it convicts them, because when you rise, you unknowingly become a living testimony that healing is possible, that transformation is possible, that change is not only achievable, but necessary. And that scares people. It threatens them, not because they don't want to change, but because change requires effort, honesty, and discomfort. And not everyone is willing to pay the price for that kind of freedom. You see, there's a strange reaction that happens when your life begins to shift. People start treating your improvement as if it's an insult to their condition. Your discipline shines a light on their laziness. Your boundaries highlight their codependency. Your clarity makes their confusion stand out. You're not judging them. You're just no longer joining them, and that shift causes tension. It introduces friction. Because as long as you were broken together, struggling together, stuck together, there was no conflict. But the moment you start moving forward, they start feeling left behind. Many relationships are built on sameness. Not real connection, just shared condition. The same complaints, the same excuses, the same pain cycles. And as long as you stayed in that familiar rhythm, they accepted you. But healing breaks rhythm. Growth changes the beat. Now you're moving differently. You don't gossip like you used to. You don't entertain toxic habits like you used to. You don't sit in circles that speak from bitterness and call it wisdom. You've upgraded your mind, your spirit, your habits. And those still stuck in the old pattern can't relate to this new version of you. The truth is, your growth exposes what others are trying to avoid. It reveals that they've had the same opportunity to change, the same time, the same grace, but they chose comfort over transformation. And now, rather than ask you how to grow too, they choose to resent your evolution. Because it's easier to critique what they don't understand than to confront what they don't want to change. You didn't rise to be praised. You rose because staying the same was killing you. You made a decision, a fight for peace, to pursue purpose, to protect your mental and spiritual health. That decision didn't require approval, but it did require loss. And in that loss, you found out who was really for you, because people will celebrate you when you're weak. They'll cheer when you're dependent. But the moment you begin to walk in strength, they get quiet, and that silence speaks volumes. What they don't realize is that your growth isn't just about you. It's an invitation, an open door, a demonstration of what's possible when someone dares to heal. You're not perfect, you're not finished, but you've decided to stop pretending that pain is home. You've chosen movement over misery, and every day you wake up and keep choosing to grow, you make it harder for others to keep making excuses. That's where the discomfort comes from. That's where the envy is born. They don't hate you because you're winning. They hate the reminder that they could have started winning too. They don't resent your joy. They resent that your joy cost you something they weren't willing to pay. Late nights, hard conversations, isolation, forgiveness, discipline, faith. You earned this growth. You fought for it. And now that you're here, they want to talk about how you changed. Of course you did. Because life demanded it. And those who refuse to evolve want you to stay small, stay sick, stay silent. Just to make them feel better about not changing. But you owe no one an apology for becoming whole. You don't have to justify your progress. You don't need permission to be better. You don't have to slow down to match the pace of people who are walking in circles. If they wanted what you have, they'd do what you did. And if they truly loved you, they'd celebrate the fact that you no longer cry yourself to sleep, that you finally have peace, that you're finally free. Growth is a gift, but it's also a test. It reveals who's really with you and who was just with your wounds. Some people were never invested in you. They were invested in your pain, and now that the pain is leaving, so are they. Let them go. People often talk about loyalty, about connection, about love that lasts through the storms. But what they don't tell you is that much of what we call friendship isn't built on shared values, vision, or purpose. It's built on shared pain. Wounded people gravitate toward other wounded people, not always to heal, but to survive, to vent, to feel seen in their struggle, and for a season, that can feel like support. It feels like love. It feels like understanding. But the truth is, many of those bonds are trauma bonds, not true relationships. You didn't become friends because you were growing in the same direction. You became friends because you were hurting in the same place. And while you thought it was loyalty that held you together, it was really your shared wounds that gave you a reason to stay connected. So when you began to heal, when you finally said, I can't keep bleeding over the same things, or I have to forgive to move forward, suddenly that connection started to shift. The conversation started to feel different. You weren't laughing at the same jokes anymore. You weren't interested in revisiting the same pain, rehashing the same betrayal, recycling the same bitterness. You were starting to break free, but they were still holding on. You were starting to walk, but they were still crawling, and instead of being inspired by your progress, they were offended by it. Because when pain is the glue, healing becomes the threat. There are people who love the version of you that sat in the dark with them. They knew how to talk to that you. They could predict that you. They could relate to that you, the version that cried with them, that complained with them, that cursed life with them, that blamed the world for their pain with them. But the moment you started to speak in hope instead of hurt, they didn't know who you were anymore. You changed the language. You shifted the energy. You started talking about dreams, goals, peace, boundaries, therapy, and God. And those weren't words they wanted to hear, because they had become comfortable in their pain. Healing requires separation. Not always physical, but emotional, spiritual, and mental separation. When you heal, your standards rise, your desires mature. What used to entertain you now grieves you. What used to comfort you now disturbs you. That's not pride, it's transformation. That's not judgment, it's growth. But people who haven't done the work to grow will take your transformation personally. They'll accuse you of thinking you're better. They'll say you forgot who you are. No, you just remembered who you were before the pain. You just finally saw that you're more than your wounds. But here's the uncomfortable part. Many of those you once leaned on won't clap for your healing. Because your decision to get better feels like rejection to them, they don't understand that you're not walking away from them. You're walking toward wholeness. But because they've only ever known you in brokenness, your wholeness feels like betrayal. You were the mirror that made them feel seen, even in their mess. Now that the mirror is changing, they don't want to look. You were never meant to stay wounded. You were never meant to sit in circles that keep reopening the same scars. Yes, you bonded in pain, but real love doesn't chain you to your trauma. Real friendship says, let's heal together, let's rise together, let's confront this together. But when people aren't ready, they'll resent you for outgrowing the pain they still call home. And that's not your fault. God did not bring you through all that you've been through just to leave you bitter, angry, and stuck. He didn't pull you from the fire just so you could return to the ashes. He brought you out so you could show others that healing is possible. So don't let the fear of losing connections keep you tied to places you no longer belong. If the only thing you share with someone is pain, then healing will always create distance. And that's okay. You don't owe anyone your stagnation. You don't have to apologize for choosing growth over grief. You're not responsible for how your healing makes others feel. You are only responsible for being faithful to your process, to your purpose, and to the God who called you out of darkness into light. So yes, it may hurt to lose people who once felt like family, but healing will show you that some people weren't your family, they were your fellow prisoners. And once you found the key, it was never your job to stay in the cell. You can pray for them, you can love them, but you can't bleed with them just to keep them comfortable. You were meant to be free. Let them go if they cannot walk with you in healing. Let them hate if they cannot handle your peace. Let them watch as you become what you were always meant to be, whole, healthy, free, and unapologetically healed. Because healing is not betrayal. It's breakthrough, and you deserve it. Healing doesn't just change how you feel, it changes what you tolerate. It shifts your entire perspective, reshapes your relationships, and forces you to redefine the lines between what's acceptable and what's no longer allowed in your life. Because when you were broken, your boundaries were blurry. You made excuses for behavior that dishonored you. You allowed people to mistreat you and called it love. You endured toxicity and labeled it loyalty. But healing is a wake-up call. It opens your eyes to what should have never been permitted in the first place. When you begin to heal, your internal system starts sounding alarms that were previously muted by pain. You start to notice the passive aggression. You start to feel the weight of unspoken expectations. You start recognizing manipulation, control, gaslighting, and emotional neglect. Not because it suddenly appeared, but because you finally stopped ignoring it. Healing doesn't bring new problems. It reveals old patterns you once survived but can no longer accept. And the moment you start setting boundaries, real, clear, unapologetic boundaries, the people who benefited from your lack of them begin to react. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're disrupting the system they got comfortable in. You're saying no now. You're protecting your time. You're guarding your peace. You're no longer available for the same dysfunction that once defined your daily life. And that makes some people feel like you're attacking them. But you're not attacking. They were just too used to having unrestricted access to a version of you that no longer exists. There are people in your life who got used to the version of you that never said no. The version of you that overextended yourself, that said yes when you were tired, that gave when you had nothing left, that tolerated disrespect in the name of keeping the peace. But healing teaches you that keeping peace with others at the expense of your own well-being is not peace, it's bondage. It's self-abandonment, and healing teaches you to return to yourself, to reclaim the voice that trauma tried to silence. It's not that you're becoming harsh or distant. You're becoming healthy, and health looks like space. Health looks like discernment. Health looks like, I love you, but I can't continue to allow this. It looks like walking away from conversations that drain you. It looks like stepping back from people who only call when they need something. It looks like refusing to be guilted into doing what no longer aligns with your spirit. You're not responsible for how people react to your healing. You're responsible for honoring the growth God has birthed in you. And when people start calling you different, when they accuse you of changing, when they try to shame you for evolving, remind yourself that's what healing does. It changes your standards. It calls you higher. It pulls you out of people pleasing and plants you in purpose. And not everyone is going to understand the boundaries you now require, because not everyone was meant to go where you're going. Some people only knew how to relate to you through your pain. Your chaos gave them a place. Your wounds gave them permission to step in and take space. But now that you're healing, now that you've started standing on your own 2 feet, now that you're no longer tolerating emotional inconsistency or one-sided relationships, they don't know what to do. Because your healing makes them accountable for their behavior, and some people don't want accountability. They want access without responsibility. But healing teaches you something vital. Your boundaries are not up for negotiation. You don't have to explain why you need space. You don't have to justify why you no longer engage in certain conversations. You don't need to defend the peace you had to fight for. If someone can't respect your healing, they don't belong in your future. You can forgive them. You can bless them. But you are under no obligation to keep letting them cross lines just to prove you're a good person. You are a good person. That's why you're healing. That's why you're changing. That's why you're finally showing up for yourself in the way you've always shown up for others. And if your boundaries push people away, it's not rejection. It's revelation. It's exposing who was only in your life for what you could do for them, not who truly valued who you are. Healing is a holy act. It's sacred, and it comes with the responsibility of protecting the newness God is birthing in you. So keep setting the boundaries. Keep saying no to what depletes you. Keep choosing your peace over people's approval. Because the ones who are meant to be in your life will honor your boundaries, not fight them. They will grow with you, not guilt you. And those who leave were never aligned with your healing to begin with. This is your season to stop shrinking for the sake of making others comfortable. You are not the same. You are healing. And healing demands that you guard the ground you've gained. So stand firm, set the boundary, and walk forward, free, whole, and unapologetically healed. Healing doesn't just change your habits or your outlook. It changes your identity. It challenges the version of yourself that others have become comfortable with and forces everyone around you to relearn who you really are. Because the truth is, when you were broken, people didn't just get used to your pain. They built their expectations around it. They shaped their image of you based on who you were in your trauma, not who you are in your transformation. So when healing begins to take root, when you start showing up differently, speaking differently, setting new standards, dreaming again, people don't know how to handle the shift, and for many, that shift feels like loss. You see, the old you, the one who doubted themselves, who settled for less, who kept quiet to keep the peace, who hid behind shame, who wore a mask to survive, that version of you was familiar. That version was predictable. People knew how to talk to that you, how to treat that you, how to handle that you, but healing strips off the mask. It peels back the layers. It resurrects the original version of you before pain distorted your worth. And that version doesn't fit into the box others try to keep you in. Some people won't celebrate your growth because your transformation requires them to make a choice. Either grow with you or be left behind. Your healing demands them to shift the way they see you, and not everyone is willing to do that work, because it's easier to cling to the image they have of you than to accept the new reality that you've outgrown their expectations. It's not just about boundaries or success, it's about identity. Healing restores who you are at your core. It reintroduces you to yourself. You start remembering dreams you had buried. You start reclaiming confidence that had been stripped. You begin to speak in your own voice, not the voice shaped by rejection, abandonment, or trauma. And the moment you do that, the relationships, environments, and structures built around the broken version of you begin to feel misaligned. This is why healing can feel lonely. Because as you step into who you're becoming, you may lose the approval of those who only knew how to engage with the version of you that was hiding. The version that laughed when it wasn't funny. That smiled when it was hurting. That agreed when it wanted to scream. That said, "I'm fine," when it was falling apart. But now, you're choosing truth. You're choosing transparency. You're choosing to show up fully without apology. And that level of authenticity demands a response. Either people embrace the real you or they retreat from the new you. It's a painful truth. Not everyone will be ready to meet the healed you. Some people prefer you broken because your brokenness validated their own. Your limitations made them feel comfortable in their complacency. Your silence made room for their loudness. Your insecurity made space for their control. But when you heal, you no longer play small. You no longer tolerate being misunderstood to keep others comfortable. And those who benefited from your silence will call your confidence arrogance. They'll label your growth as betrayal. But what they're really mourning is the death of the version of you they could manipulate, contain, or define. You don't owe anyone the old version of yourself. You don't have to go back just because people refuse to go forward. Healing is not about pleasing the crowd. It's about becoming who you were created to be. And if that version of you makes others uncomfortable, let them adjust or let them leave. Either way, you're no longer shrinking to be accepted. This is the season where your identity must align with your purpose. You can't walk in your calling while wearing a costume. You can't step into destiny while clinging to dysfunction. The healed you is the real you. The confident you, the clear-minded you, the bold, unapologetic, purpose-driven you. And if that version of you disrupts the status quo, so be it. There is no glory in staying broken for the sake of familiarity. There is no honor in being small, so others feel big. And there is no reward for keeping people comfortable while your soul stays crushed. Healing is not just personal. It's spiritual. It's prophetic. It's purposeful. And it will disturb every false narrative, every shallow relationship, and every weak foundation that was built on who you were, not who you're becoming. Let them talk. Let them gossip. Let them question the shift. You're not here to explain your evolution. You're here to walk in it. You're here to live out loud, whole and holy. And if your healing demands that others learn who you are, then so be it. You didn't come this far to pretend anymore. You didn't survive the storm to stay silent. You didn't overcome the pit to keep acting like you're still in it. So now you see, this hate you're feeling, this resistance you're facing, this isolation you're enduring, it's not because you're failing. It's because you're healing, you're breaking cycles, you're rewriting narratives, you're confronting generational pain and saying, it stops with me. And that kind of healing will always be disruptive. It will always stir the waters. It will always cause people to look at you differently. Because you are different, but let me tell you this, don't you dare apologize for getting well. Don't you dare feel guilty for growing. Don't you shrink yourself to make people comfortable with a version of you that was never meant to last. You are not here to babysit other people's insecurity. You are here to be whole. You are here to walk in the fullness of your calling. You are here to become everything God had in mind when He created you. Yes, they may distance themselves. Yes, they may slander your name. Yes, they may look at you like a stranger. But let them go, because your healing is not a rejection of them. It's a declaration of who you truly are. And anybody who loves you for real, anybody assigned to your purpose, will not be offended by your healing. They will be inspired by it. You've come too far to go back. You've cried too many nights. You've sacrificed too much peace. You've fought through too many storms to give up your freedom for familiar bondage. You are healing, and healing is your right. Healing is your victory. Healing is your deliverance. And if that threatens people, so be it. Because the same God who started this work in you will be faithful to finish it. So hold your head high, keep walking in truth. Keep setting the boundaries, keep choosing peace, keep growing, keep transforming. Because your healing is proof that you don't have to stay in the pit you were born in, that you don't have to die in the place where you got hurt, that you can rise, you can rebuild, you can recover. And no amount of hate can stop what God is doing in you. Let them hate. Let them misunderstand. Let them talk. You just keep healing.